journalist, Christian Toto, cites an example from the TV show Friends.
Rachel's haircut was a sensation. It's just a hairstyle. Nothing, no big deal. But that's the power of pop culture. Just an actress with a beautiful hairstyle can make millions of people go, I need to get that haircut. So that's what stories do. That's what pop culture.
It's a powerful tool.
Absolutely. It's not a weapon. It's not a tank. It's not a missile. But it does change hearts and minds. And I think that Chinese officials said, hey, wait a minute, we can do that too. And they're doing it.
The film's producer, Jason Jones, points out that the CCP is running the largest influence campaign in history and calls it inescapable.
You have at least 3 million Uyghur in concentration camps, slave labor, organ harvesting, forced abortions, unspeakable evil. The CCP has said, in public record, that they have to make the Uyghur the villains and the CCP the victim. Then Disney makes a movie, Milan, the live-action movie, that paints a caricature of the Uyghur that's grotesque.
After the screening, some audience members described what's happening as a declaration of war on America.
We are at war, and I think that this is just something that's a glaring highlight of how we've actually been at war for quite some time with China infiltrating this country. This is just one of the vehicles that they're using to do it.
This film is very, very interesting. It speaks about the truth. I really feel like we are in war in many ways.
Industry insiders give some analysis on China's unrestricted warfare.
So in the West, we often think of war as either you're in war militarily or you're not. It's peace. But that's not how communist China thinks. It's unrestricted warfare or hybrid warfare. So everything short of what we think of as war. So you have lawfare, like media warfare, information warfare, soft power is where the film industry comes in. You start influencing everything. You start dividing a country so that they tear each other apart.
Now people will understand this is how you're being manipulated and how you're being controlled. Not just in movies, certainly there, but also on social media and so on. So all those different methods are methods of unrestricted warfare. This whole thing, this documentary is just one vector of unrestricted warfare.
Actor Sam Sorbo says Hollywood studios are bending backwards for the Chinese market.
It's called show business, not show, right? And so it's about money. And it's funny because if you talk to them, they will claim that they are not about the money, that they're more about getting messaging across and being good people, and right, that's their whole sort of mantra is we want to save the world and we want to, but ultimately it all boils down to money.
Despite the situation, many also expressed hope for the future.
I hope that the filmmakers who watch this film would better fulfill their social responsibility to the American public and stay truthful, tell truthful stories, and maintain their integrity and not be compromised by money.
Go watch Hollywood take over. We're going to take our industry back to the United States of America.
This has been an incredibly insightful, incredibly powerful and impactful movie. A must-see. It releases on Epoch TV on March the 8th. An NTD original documentary shining a light and exposing the dark secrets of movie making and the entertainment industry, and how the Chinese Communist Party has infiltrated and controlled Hollywood studios behind the scenes. This is a must-see. This has been Ruby Lovell at the screening of Hollywood Takeover.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany.
Let's face it, everybody. These days, when you look at some movies out of Hollywood, you shake your head and you scratch your head and you think, what is going on in Hollywood? Well, it seems Hollywood movies have been progressively influenced by the Chinese regime, Communist China. Now, this is central to a new documentary by the Epoch Times called Hollywood Takeover, China's Control in the Film Industry. The film actually debuted at CPAC, and many people attended. It's one of the largest yearly gatherings of conservatives, and you can take a look at the audience's reactions immediately following the screening of Hollywood Takeover.
There's something magical about the movies that I just love.
Hollywood invented America to the world in the old days.
And as a medium, it's really powerful. But for some, that power isn't used for good.
Our way of life is being censored by the Chinese Communist Party.
They said, we get a lot of our money out of China. Is there any way you could make this movie a little bit more attractive to the Chinese?
Is it really just about money? Are there other parts at stake? I had friends in Hollywood who said, this will kill your career. You won't get funding. They're afraid of even mentioning one line.
Chinese influence was playing into what we see in U.S. films.
China said, you can't have that in there. And Hollywood listened. This is insane. This is a joke, right?
We raised our hand and we dove right into it. But over time, all of us have been punched in the nose.
The Chinese Communist follow no rules.
What's at stake? The soul of the nation is at stake.
We want indoctrination access to America. They could basically take over America without firing a shot because they control access to our minds. And we all know that their goal is global domination.
People have been brainwashed without knowing it. See my good friend Tiffany Meyer hosting that particular program. It airs on Epoch TV on March 8th. And there's a lot of buzz, as you would imagine, about a new movie right now that will be released this year in August. Cuba Gooding Jr. and Kevin Sorbo star in the film, The Firing Squad. Now, the movie is based on the incredible true story of Christian prisoners who face execution in the Third World. Their joy in Christ wins over the entire prison camp. And Epoch Times and Epoch Studios is helping release the film to 2,500 theaters across the U.S. and the world in August 2024. And we're going to be talking to Kevin Sorbo in just a few moments. And also coming up tonight, one of my good friends, John Tesh, musician extraordinaire, broadcast extraordinaire, songwriter, broadcaster, author, and a good family man. He talks about more secrets of answered prayer and life coaching. He'll be joining us to share his dramatic story of conquering cancer through the power of prayer. So let's get started with Kevin Sorbo. I met up with Kevin in Nashville, where they did a screening of the new film, The Firing Squad. Many of you already know him. Hercules. No, it's actually...
Thank you, Eddie Murphy.
His name is Kevin Sorbo. Kevin, good to have you.
Good to be here.
It's been a while since we've actually been together in person, although you have been on America's Hope virtually. But it's so good to see you again in person. You look great.
My contacts.
And you're also doing something that Epoch Times is a co-producer of, The Firing Squad.
Yep.
Talk to me about it.
Hello, Kevin.
It's only from about 10 years ago. It's a true story. It goes back further than that with my character. He was put in a Indonesian prison when he killed somebody when he was in his 20s. And he was on the death row for decades. And then this movie deals with the end of his time. But prior to that, while he was in prison, he found God. He found Jesus. He became a pastor in the church. And he would preach. And, of course, some prisoners tell him to take a hike. But he changed many, and saved many lives, many souls during that time. And this movie comes at the end of it when he actually goes out in front of the firing squad and is put to death.
Wow.
And didn't want the blindfold. He wanted to look the men in the eyes that were about to kill him, because they all knew who he was. Because he was in prison so long, he looked at every one of those guards and blessed them all.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's really the story of the young man in the middle there, because it's his story that was probably the hardest one, that probably needed God more than what we all need God, but probably needed it more than anybody at that time when he was preaching. Yeah. And he brought him to the Lord before he was executed as well. And Cuba Gooding is in there as well, and he was phenomenal. And it's coming out in August. We got 3,000 screens. It's going to be a big release.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see.
Lord Heavenly Father, I pray to you today to guide us tomorrow.
Give us strength as we face death. Help us not to be afraid, as we know that we are going to become your people.
Got a big premiere in LA mid-August, so I'll be in Los Angeles. I escaped there 5 years ago. I love the free state of Florida, by the way, but I'm heading back to LA. We'll see if they welcome me home.
But for a purpose.
For a purpose.
Yeah, so you've been called for a purpose.
Yeah.
To really spread some good news in a bad news world.
Exactly. Which we need more than anything in this world right now.
Don't go any
people in my life, religious leaders in my life, that there's such. Yes, some can get really, get up there and it just hallelujah Jesus, but some have this calm power about them, and that's the way I wanted to play this character.
And what really stunned me was the fact that the anchor said, how would they feel right now, the night of the execution? And they said, they're calm. And the TV anchor said, why? And he said, because they have a savior. As soon as I heard savior, I said, hey, there's something more to this.
The notion that a faithless convict can do a complete 180 and turn to God could sound far-fetched to some, but to Cuba, being forced to confront the inevitable might be the moment that changes it all.
What's darker than the fact that you know that you're about to meet your maker? You know you're about to end your life. And do you do it in fear? Do you do it in despair? Or do you give thanks for what you have and what has been given to you? And do you appreciate that moment?
To some first-time viewers, the implications of the death penalty go way beyond the legal concepts of criminal law.
In the movie, it mentions how everyone has a death penalty, a death sentence in the end. And I think if you think about it that way, if you just give up your life to Christ, then in the end, everything kind of just flows through.
Despite the film's Christian nature, audience members praise its universal message.
I wouldn't say that it was like a Christian film. I would say like it's a really cool movie, and then you discover God. You know what I mean?
I think that the message was very strong. I think that it's a message that's universal, that transcends all religions, not just Christianity, and that is that of forgiveness and compassion, and the ability of man to be redeemed, through faith.
The Epic Times and Epic Studios are releasing the film in 2,500 theaters across the United States and the world on August 9th. BJ Kang, NTD News, Los Angeles.
Guests today are James Herzen, a New York Times bestselling author, international business attorney, news analyst, cultural commentator, and social media scholar. He's appeared on NBC, ABC, Fox News Channel, Fox Business Channel, CNN, HLN, CNBC, MSNBC, the BBC, and others. He's a public speaker and weekly columnist for Newsmax.com with his Left Coast Report. Pearson is also a lawyer and law professor with the distinction of having been admitted to the U.S. Supreme Court, a member of the Academy and SAG-AFTRA. James got his start as a professional musician with a variety of productions, most notably as keyboardist for the legendary Temptations. Next, we have Naina May, the founder of Renaissance Women Productions, an educational nonprofit foundation with international training in the media. Naina wrote, produced, and directed the film Life Fine-Tuned that won the International Family Film Festival in Hollywood 2012 and over 14 other awards. Naina has testified before the United Nations General Assembly and Senate Foreign Relations Committee and worked with several countries establishing exchange programs for future leaders. She was president of Naina May Design, specializing in congressional publications for over 150 congressional offices, and she's also the editor of Paradigm 2000 magazine and Renaissance magazine. And we have Christian Toto, an award-winning film critic, journalist, podcaster, and founder of HollywoodInTotal.com. The right take on entertainment. He's been covering Hollywood from a right-of-center perspective for more than 20 years, including contributions to the New York Post, The Federalist, The Daily Wire, National Review, Outkick, Newsbusters, and more. Christian previously served as an associate editor at Breitbart News and covered the arts at both the Washington Times and the Pittsburgh Tribune Review. He's also the author of the book Virtue Bombs: How Hollywood Got Woke and Lost Its Soul. So, Christian, let me start off with you. And my question to you is, in the film Hollywood, Sam Sorbo says the soul of the nation is at stake. How does this statement resonate with you?
Well, I think when you look at the soul of any nation, it's reflected in their art. It could be TV, it could be movies, it could be music, any kind of art. And I think what we're seeing now in Hollywood is an industry that seems almost embarrassed by itself, almost unwilling to share the good things about America, free speech, liberty. Those elements are often pushed aside when you see the stories that are being told. And often there's almost a hyper focus on the country's flaws. And every country has flaws. America has flaws. Just mentioned racism from the past and slavery for sure. And all these things are fodder for films. But I think that there's this lack in the storytelling of stories that resonate, stories that matter, stories that reflect the best of the culture. And I think without them, there's a bit of a disconnect between the industry and the audience. And I think it's been growing wider in recent years.
And Nina, I understand you also have seen this film. So, same question to you. How does this statement resonate with you? And perhaps a reaction to what Christian just said.
Well, to be honest, I think a lot of it is reflected in the box office. If you look at a lot of the movies that are coming out right now that are nominated for Best Picture for the Oscar, they're horrible. I mean, they're just really, really bad. And so they're not looking at how many people are coming, how much money there's being made. They're looking at it being another notch on their belt of indoctrination. And even if one person sees it and one person's mind has changed, they're successful. It doesn't matter if they spent $1 gazillion on it. That's their underlying goal. Look at the picture that won last year. It was Everything, Everywhere, All at Once or something. It's one of the craziest movies I've ever seen. And I honestly believe that if it had not been for the Chinese backing of this movie, and it is a Chinese movie, that it would not have gotten that kind of support. And it's sort of like The Emperor's New Clothes. We're all going, do you see what I'm seeing? No, I think it's a fabulous movie. No, really, do you see what I'm seeing? It was a horrible movie. And to be honored with the highest award in the industry is a slap in the face to everyone that works hard, diligently, telling a story, trying to be entertaining, trying to get their message out, but without any kind of indoctrination agenda. So we have to be sort of mind our P's and Q's as producers. We need to put our money where our mouth is and not fall into that trap. When we did First Lady, I was very, very careful. It's a romantic comedy. I was very careful not to have anyone know what political party she was from. I was very careful of that because I didn't want someone to go, it's the Republican Party movie. I don't want anything to do with it. Or, it's Democrat. I can't believe you did something with the Democrats. So we did in and out, and everyone felt good about it because no one was targeted, no one was slighted, and it worked fine.
And James,
Nina is hinting on here, if I may just jump in, is that I've been using this term for a while now. They call it show business, but the business almost has an asterisk next to it because it's often more about promoting the message as opposed to just making a lot of money and making a lot of people happy. So there are films out there that are Oscar nominated that you look at their box office, it can be quite small, but that doesn't matter. If the message is right, that it kind of elevates within the industry. But they really should be trying to broaden their net as many people as possible.
And James, your reaction?
The soul of a nation refers to the shared values of a nation. De Tocqueville said that America is great because America is good. And the original, call them the founding fathers of the original studio system. You referred to your introduction to the Hays Code. That was reflective of a shared culture of norms. And there were lines that would not be crossed. And particularly when it comes to what was presented to young people, what is presented to children. And not only has Hollywood, has this, we use the term wokeness to describe it. Elon Musk calls it the woke mind virus. It's a contagion, but what it has resulted in is forms of media that instead of communicating with others or following orders, are destructive, are actually disruptive, destructive, and evil. And so America's great because America's good. Hollywood is not great because parts of Hollywood become evil.
All right, we just have to take a short break. More on Hollywood when we
David
return with our panel.
Weinstein.
The highest art.
And was our biggest export throughout the world. People discovered American culture through exports of Hollywood entertainment media. And because of the fact that the storytellers, first of all, believed in the foundational principles of storytelling, took their cues from the Greek tragedies and from Shakespeare, and stuck with stories that resonated with human beings because we are created to resonate to stories. And we always loved stories. You know, before there was Hollywood, people told stories. So Hollywood deviated from its primary vocation of seeking art that would uplift, entertain, create joy, create beauty, to what it is today, which has become an agenda-driven, anti-freedom kind of milieu that affects the creators of the media most of all. I interface with writers are the most miserable people on earth, the writers in Hollywood, particularly comedy writers, but all writers, because they're handcuffed by these rules, some written, some unwritten, and they no longer can have that freedom of brainstorming that allows the great product to be created.
And James, before the break, you said something that caught my attention. You said Hollywood is evil, and I'm sure you don't say that lightly. Would you like to elaborate?
I said, well, I want to be clear. Not all of Hollywood is evil, but a significant part of Hollywood. And to elaborate on that, we have to bring up, unfortunately, the biggest entertainment company in the history of man, the biggest entertainment company in the world. So goes Disney, so goes Hollywood. And Disney was past tense, not only an incredible brand, but an incredible business. Christian referred to that business with an asterisk. Bob Iger, who's now running Disney, the poor guy, he's responsible for some of the greatest business decisions in any business. He amassed the greatest catalog of entertainment properties ever, and thanks to the woke mind virus and this pandering to basically, you know, it is the left wing and it's the globalist mindset. We've seen Disney destroy its brand and see it kind of systematically take down all these brands that Bob Iger put together. We were talking about the Star Wars brand, Marvel brand, Pixar brand. And when I say evil, I think the quintessential example of evil is that Disney would be involved with distributing product meant for kids, young children, that have content that is either inappropriate in a sexual way, but also inappropriate with having, for example, having Satan as the main character and having Satan have a romance with a teenager. That's a recent idea. But that's what I mean by evil.
I see.
And ironically, with Disney being the topic here, Disney was the inspiration for me to make films the way I do. I'm a producer, writer, director. And every aspect of the trip along the way to get from point A to point B has always been, is it Is it healthy? Is it good? Is it entertaining? Can the whole family watch it together? And that, I think, was the touchstone of Disney, is that even if it was a cartoon, they did it in such a way that the adults taking their children to see the cartoon would enjoy it as well. It was very entertaining, very well done, just very, very creative on so many levels. So that inspired me. And I am so saddened to see what has happened with Disney. And there are very few producers that are saying, let's go back to that model where the whole family can watch it. You don't need the F-bomb every other word. You don't need the gratuitous sex scenes or the violence and the just debauchery. And you do need to see something that you can spend with your family. And so that's been our motto. The interesting thing is the romantic comedy that we did, First Lady, was in the Cannes Film Festival, which is unheard of, to have a romantic comedy with not a single F-bomb, you know, going back to maybe the way movies were made in the 50s. But the reason it got in the Cannes Film Festival is there are cultures around the world that are turning off the funnel of Hollywood movies because they're saying, whoa, we can't show that in our country. We can't have that. We have our standards. And so when they looked at our little movie, First Lady, they said, this works. I mean, it doesn't have a Disney title to it. It's not a major production. It was SAG, but it was not, big budget or anything. And it made it to the big leagues because of the content. The content was very acceptable on a global basis. And to me, that's success right there.
Christian?
One thing that was mentioned just a few minutes ago was the comedy perspective. And I've been following this pretty relentlessly in the last few years. If you're a comedy writer, if you're a stand-up comedian, this is what you do for a living, there are so many unofficial guardrails on what you can say, what you can joke about, the targets of your humor. Are you punching up? Are you punching down? And all of that has a really, a negative effect on the creative flow. I mean, you want to be able to tell your stories your way, tell your jokes your way, and sometimes the most uncomfortable jokes are the ones that make us see things in a profound new way. And I think the satirists over the years, over the decades, have proven that. And I think that we're living in this time now where the mainstream of Hollywood just doesn't go there, for lack of a better phrase. And what you're seeing is a lot of comedians on the periphery, outside of Hollywood, working on, could be Rumble, it could be YouTube, it could be their Patreon accounts to keep themselves afloat. But they're telling the difficult jokes, the controversial jokes, the funny jokes. And I think once, I wrote a whole book about woke Hollywood. That's one of the more negative effects, is that when you can't say what you want to say, when you can't think what you want to think, and when you have to lie instead of telling the truth, then I think the product suffers.
And Christian, I'm sensing a general theme here, and that is ethics within Hollywood. But another factor that plays into all this is money. If a movie does not make money being good, then it won't get made. Your comments on that?
Every Hollywood studio, every director, they want to make a good movie ultimately. They are trying, even the worst movies, the worst directors. I give them credit. They're trying their best. But it is interesting that I think that Hollywood, sometimes the profit model isn't number one. They want to get certain stories out into the public. Before we were talking officially on air, someone mentioned the movie God and Country. It's a documentary from Rob Reiner. And it's all about attacking Christian nationalists, so-called Christian nationalists. And I think the people behind the scenes, the people who made that movie, I don't think they're thinking about profit. I don't think they're suggesting this is going to make a lot of money. They want to put it into the marketplace. They want to see magazines and news outlets cover it and expand on the topic and magnify it, so that even if it is a flop, and it is, it's impacting the culture in some way. So I think some storytellers today aren't as interested in a hit as impacting the culture, getting their message out, knowing that movie in a year or so, maybe less, will be on different streaming platforms, and it'll be seen, and it may change some hearts and minds. And I think that is sometimes more important for Hollywood right now than it is, telling stories that make a profit and make people happy.
Okay, Nina, maybe.
If I could add about the money, I just think, and Christian's absolutely right. When we look at the money issue in Hollywood, I mean, the key, and in the back rooms of the boardrooms, they talk about profit margins, and faith-based movies have one of the highest profit margins. They've proven profitable. You look at Angel Studios and you look at what's happened with the success of The Chosen, the success of Sound of Freedom. They have a new movie, Cabrini, coming out, and their wide releases and their margins are just fantastic. Now, some segments of Hollywood, their heads have turned and they said, wait a minute, and they've set up faith-based divisions and they're courting some of these makers. And this is a bright spot in Hollywood because there is some creativity that goes against the grain. But it does also support Bishop's theory, which is a fact. All you have to do is look at a relative of Hollywood, which is MSNBC theater and CNN theater. And we look at those, they don't make money. They're not money-making operations. Something other than the profit motive is going on in our media and in Hollywood. And a big part of it is, in fact, inserting agenda-driven content into product. And sometimes that agenda-driven content ends up bombing, like the film that we just made, Rob Reiner's film, which did $38,000 in its opening weekend, and it's laughable. And obviously, it's an election year. Rob Reiner got that made. There are people that all of a sudden were talking about the subject of Christian nationalism, which is, by the way, almost non-existent.
Right.
What Rob Reiner describes in his movie. That movie actually is a fraud and a slander, but it was pushed, it was financed. It's not cheap even to make that kind of documentary.
We just have to take a very short break here, James. But when we return, we'll continue our conversation with a deep dive into the influence of Hollywood.
And then that's when you started seeing it reflected in the box office too, because people said, I'm not going to spend 2 hours of my time and my money to be indoctrinated into a belief system that I don't believe in, or to watch something that's been so dumbed down that it's not even entertaining anymore. It reminded me of the old Soviet Union. Remember when you were stuck in the in-tourist hotel and you had the guides, so to speak, they would only allow you to go into a certain area. And they were so proud of their entertainment. But their entertainment was so vanilla. There was nothing there. You weren't allowed to say this. You weren't allowed to do that. You weren't allowed to laugh at something that could possibly insult someone in the Politburo or whatever. And you left feeling a nervous wreck. You were not entertained at all. It's like, oh my gosh, get me out of here. And that's what I see is going in America, where people are being told, this is funny and you will laugh. This is not funny and you will not laugh. There will be consequences to your actions. And you go, okay, great. I think I'll just go putt-putt tonight. I'm not going to go to the movies. And that's where people are today, I think, in that nexus of, do we make the change? Do we stay where we are? Or just, we made the change. We're not playing anymore with the Hollywood stuff. We don't do SAG anymore. We don't work with any actors that are SAG. Most of them have gone FICOR anyway. So SAG is like the dying breed as far as I'm concerned.
So, Christian, how prevalent is Chinese influence in Hollywood, and your reactions?
Well, I think in the last few years we've seen many different examples where Hollywood films are tweaked, edited, content is added to appease the Chinese marketplace because the studios want those films to get into China and all the theaters there and the huge population. So on a strictly capitalistic point of view, it does make some sense. But of course, you have all these artists in Hollywood who will, rail against censorship and say we have to tell our stories our way. And yet when it comes to getting their movie in China, they'll snip here, they'll snip there, they'll add this, they'll add that. And it's a complicated issue. And it's ironic because China, the Chinese government, wants to make movies that are very propagandistic, that extol the values of China and the culture.
Yeah.
And then back in America, it's the opposite. Where filmmakers are almost afraid to say, yeah, this is a pretty good country. Maybe we should amplify the reasons why.
Yeah.
And so there's an interesting dance going on there.
And James, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's, people that run tyrannies have always been enamored with Hollywood. Hitler made propaganda films. Stalin put a hit out on John Wayne. This thing with China's been going on for a long time. I think it's, if we focus on a name from the past, there was a top box office actor, hottest actor in Hollywood. I'll tell you his name, you'll remember. Richard Gere. Richard Gere disappeared. Why is it that Richard Gere all of a sudden didn't get roles? It's because he championed Tibet. And Tibetan Buddhism is held in low esteem by the CCP. Tibetans are persecuted, and Richard Gere championed the Dalai Lama. And so Richard Gere disappeared. He didn't disappear because he was a bad actor. He was a great actor. He disappeared because the CCP wanted him to. And similar to what that Red Dawn example, which is amazing because the part of that story was that they had finished the film. The film was written. The film is edited. The script was edited. They did the principal photography. They were ready to do the final edit. Twist the director's arm. Your favorite parts have to go. But they were all ready, and then all of a sudden the word came down. That the Chinese market wanted the bad guy to be changed. They had to use CGI to reshoot scenes, cost a lot of money, and that's an example. And as, of course, the Chinese film market has grown, it recently became the largest market in the world. It surpassed the United States. Of course, their clout increased. But Xi Jinping is very astute, and he realizes the power of the entertainment business. And so and he is very active in this country, as we know. And so the CCP, which really is Xi Jinping, is going to pressure as much as they can and influence as much as they can, and lobby for those kinds of entertainment product, especially when it comes to Japan or even here, that helps their cause, and we see that happen. So it's a very powerful influence, and it's not just, of course, in the business of Hollywood. It's in businesses across the country.
Right.
But it's sort of. I was going to say, it begs the question, though, what's the quid pro quo? What is Hollywood getting in return for doing something like that, which costs millions of dollars to change the one army to the other army? What are they being funded? Is it they have bought property and they're saying, we'll sell this property unless you do what we say? It seems like there's some kind of a blackmail relationship.
Well,
but what is it exactly?
Gave them the money to buy different studios up.
But again, there's other elements of this that don't quite make sense. It's a good point, and it goes back to what Christian brought up at the asterisk when we talk about Hollywood as a business. We really don't know the answer, but at least on the surface, it appears to be economics.
But apparently, they will insert themselves in a movie that will not even be shown in China. They will censor a movie, say you must cut this, you must cut that. The powers that be go, well, but it's not even going to be shown in China. We don't care. We have the power over you. Again, what's that power? Is my question.
Christian?
Well, as you said, and I think Don references, it costs a lot to make a movie, and they're always seeking fresh.
It's the Benjamins, baby.
Fresh financing from all over the world, and one of those sources now is China. They want to keep that door open, and that's the facade of China. We have multiple companies, some of which are traded on the stock exchange.
Right.
But they're all owned by the CCP. They're all run by the CCP.
We just have a bit of time before we have to wrap up here. Christian, any final thoughts?
Yeah, listen. There's two things going on. One is if you get your movie into Chinese theaters, the potential for box office success it expands exponentially. But in recent years, Chinese filmmakers, the homegrown filmmakers there, have upped their game, have gotten more sophisticated, can make blockbuster-like movies that are very similar to what Hollywood makes. And so what happened is, after Hollywood has essentially sold their soul to China and the government, all of a sudden, those movies our movies there aren't making a lot of money. And the locally made Chinese films are the blockbusters, are at the top of the charts. So whereas a superhero movie made by Disney might have made 2, 3, 400 million there, it'll make a fraction of that now. And I bet you that number's going to keep coming down and down, where local Chinese moviegoers just want to say, hey, I'd prefer to see Chinese actors in movies that speak to my culture, that are made here, as opposed to imports. And I think that's the irony of what's happening in Hollywood right now.
And that concludes our discussion today on NTD's International Reporters Roundtable. Thank you very much to all of our guests, James Herzen, Nina May, and
needed money. They started censoring and kowtowing to the Chinese Communist Party in that process, and it's really reshaped the whole fabric of the world and the way we perceive the world.
The Benjamins.
And as well, what did you hear from being rejected? What people would not say?
So some people were supportive of our project but didn't want to be a part of it. As the same point, they wanted to keep working in the industry, and a lot of people just didn't respond at all. And so that took a while to get people willing to speak to us. And I feel what's kind of funny is now that I've been doing interviews about this documentary and stuff, suddenly there's a lot of people reaching out and being like, oh my gosh, if you ever need more, I can talk to you for 17 hours about all the dirt I saw in the industry for 20 years. So who knows, if there's a part 2, we might get some bigger fish in there.
And I'm just curious, at the red carpet event, what were people's reactions after seeing the film?
So we did have a panelist of 7 people who were in the film, and they all overwhelmingly supported the project and really thanked us for getting that story out there. Among the audience, it was also very positive testimonials that we received. Many people were likening it to, say, Hitler, in World War II. He was controlling the film industry as well and trying to promote a different type of propaganda, and relating to what we're seeing now with the Chinese Communist Party doing that with all of Hollywood basically, and changing everything. So there's a lot of people really supportive of us getting the word out and how this really fits into what we're seeing everywhere, whether that's the fentanyl, the Chinese nationals crossing the border, TikTok, all these different aspects. They're just really thankful that we brought awareness to them on this topic.
And you mentioned there were 7 people on the panel. Maybe you can introduce us to perhaps a couple of them.
Yeah, so we had Chris Fenton. He's the film executive. He's featured predominantly in the documentary because he was the one that really opened the door between Hollywood and China. Back then, it was through aspirations of making China more liberal, more democratic, really engaging. And then at the same time, he really thought that every dollar made there was helping American GDP. But then throughout the years, eventually, so actually, he got Looper and Iron Man 3 into China, which both made fortunes there. And then throughout the years, eventually, he was punched in the nose, metaphorically, and realized that he didn't want his children to grow up in a Cold War, and realized that this engaging with China wasn't actually helping America or the world. It was hurting the free world. So he was one of the panelists. We had Kevin and Sam Sorbo of Hercules fame. Those have their own studios. Kevin was also in Soul Surfer, that's very famous, and he says he gets stopped in the street for that film, not the Hercules franchise that lasted over a decade. We also had Casey Fleming. He's the CEO of Black Ops Partners, an intelligence cybersecurity firm. Steve Yates, he was a former national security advisor to the White House. He was also part of Radio Free Asia, and he now is part of the America First Policy Institute. We also had Jason Jones, who is a film producer and tells the stories that he really wants to. He knows everyone around the world and just really spends time producing the films he wants to, and especially shining a light on what's happening inside China or highlighting the voices who aren't heard normally. And we also had Christian Toto, who's a film critic for over 20 years. He is Hollywoodandtoto.com is his site. It's a very fun site. he was also there and had some very good insights on what happened to Hollywood through all these years and how it became less and less American.
So you mentioned Chris Fenton was able to get Iron Man 3 and Looper into China. So I'm wondering, is there more loyalty to China than the US when it comes to Hollywood?
You could say that. Chris Fenton didn't think that in the beginning. He really felt that this was helping the two countries come, the two superpowers come closer together, and with the engagement that it would become more liberal and all of that for communist China. But with, say, Looper and Iron Man 3, just to get past the Chinese censors, they had to change a lot of the story. So Looper, originally, the script, it involves time travel, which is a subject that's banned in China because the Chinese Communist Party likes to control everything, including the past and the future and the present. And so originally in the script, Gordon Levitt's character wants to go to France. That's his utopia. That's his dream. The final version is not that. The utopia is China. So that was a major change. And that had the audience clapping, that had the Chinese Communist censors clapping when they got to that part of the film. So that was a huge change. But think about what that does to you psychologically. You're like, wow, China's the future. China's the place everyone wants to go.
Yep.
It has an impact on the way you view the world. And then with Iron Man 3, they inserted a Chinese doctor, Dr. Wu, to save the life of Tony Stark. So think about that. It's like the Chinese Communist Party's skills, which they probably stole, which is not shown in the film, but their skills is what's saving this hero, Tony Stark, right? So that was another huge change. And then eventually one day, Chris Fenton was arguing on the phone with Marvel, trying to get this massive change in the script. And afterwards, his wife was like, whose side are you on? And he was like, America, of course. Every dollar made there is helping America, all these jobs, like all these different things. And she was like, it just really sounds like you're feeding the beast. You're just, enabling the Chinese regime. And eventually he realizes that's what was happening. But many people didn't realize that. And, they just want to get their bottom lines. And China has a massive market. For instance, back in the day, Pacific Rim, it had a budget of $190 million. It only made a little over $100 million in the U.S. box office. But that film did get into China, and it made $111 million in the China box office alone. So just by getting that film into China, it doubled its box office profits. So many studios were just like, if I can get a film into China, I'll make a profit. And in the process, these studios
All about the
gave up
Benjamins.
human rights, democracy, everything that America stands for.
Tiff, well myself, and it is a very good movie. It's going to be on Epoch TV, and I think all of our viewers should have a look if they're interested on this topic. But thank you so much for your time today, Tiffany. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Great being with you.
One of the things that China was extremely strict on us about was if you're going to have access to this market and you're going to have access to market and promote this movie far beyond most movies,